Everything is silent. Soon she's going to find me, find where I've been waiting, and I know who will win the confrontation. A few hours ago, I would still have told you, I'm not strong enough for this. I'm too weak, too pathetic, too scared. But the amazing thing about fury is how quickly it burns through fear. And now that I know all of the secrets of this place, I am fucking furious. My hands and face are covered in barely dried gore, and whenever I touch my cheek, it makes a gentle, tacky sound. I would never ever have believed that creatures as thin, as skeletal as the Tweedle twins could contain so much blood. I spent hours in my room plotting and scheming, trying to think about how best to save Ariel and maybe myself. It all revolved around the tools, how to get my hands on one, and how to use it. So many of them were sharp or pointy, or sharp and pointy. I turned idea after idea around in my mind until I had the basics of a plan. It was going to take some serious luck, not something I've had a lot of, but maybe I was owed some. When the twins next came for me, Mary wasn't with them. As I was half dragged from my room down to that hated round room, I saw spatters of vomit on the floor. Morning sickness? In spite of their appearances, these evil bastards are human, and I guess Mary is, in some ways, the same as many expectant mothers. I shoved that thought from my mind. If I'm going to do this, I can't think about her as a pregnant woman. If I do, then there's no hope. Mary was apparently still too sick to make it to the treatment room. The twins looked confused as they escorted me towards the chair, as if they were unsure of what to do. It was time for me to move. Even though they've been draining me for what feels like forever, I'm still huge. As they were looking at each other, communicating without words as usual, I threw my whole weight forward, away from the center of the room and towards the nearest workbench. Their moment of inattention was enough. I hit the ground hard and felt the sickening pain of my teeth meeting each other forcefully. It didn't matter. I had to move. The Tweedles were looking at me with an almost bemused expression. This was clearly new to them, but also mildly entertaining. They, so strong and powerful, knew full well I wasn't going anywhere but into the chair. Their hubris gave me the moments I so needed. Faster than I had ever thought possible, my hands were on the workbench, both pulling me to my feet and questing for purchase on one of the tools. As they realized their mistake, they began to move, but I was faster. Each hand had found a tool, and two is far better than one. As they closed in on me, I spun around, eyes closed, and thrust the tools forwards. I have never believed in a god or a guiding hand, but if there is one, I swear they were with me then. The tool in my left hand, some sort of auger with a vicious tip, took Dee in the right eye, while the sharp hooked object in my right hand found its way into Dum's withered throat. Both uttered identical screams of pain and fear, swiftly cut off as I pulled back my hands and plunged them forward, again and again and again. I must have hit arteries at some point, because I remember the spray misting my face and quickly turning cool. I don't know how long it took, seconds or hours, but eventually the agonal gasps issuing from their two red lips ceased. and the greenish tinge I have come to hate was distorted by their claret lifeblood. The Tweedle twins were dead. I was still alive and unharmed. I had won the battle. I realized I was on my knees, drenched and tasting copper. I lifted my head towards the tank that housed Ariel and saw that it had been spattered in my frenzy. That sight, more than anything, roused me from my fugue. My hands shook as I relinquished my tools and crawled towards the glass. I tried to wipe the bloody mess away, but stained as my hands were, I only succeeded in smearing it. A sound startled me, and it took a moment for me to understand that it had come from my own throat. I was sobbing as I stared at the infant in her water world. I turned on my knees so that my back was against the tank and tried to hold my sanity together, to order and interpret my thoughts. When I had decided I needed to save Ariel, it was because she was an innocent. She was not responsible for the actions of the sick fucks that had created and birthed her. She was just a baby. But now, after seeing her tank splashed with my carnage, I accepted what I had been denying, even subconsciously. I loved this child, and I wanted to keep her from all harm, all ugliness. I wanted nothing evil or even unpleasant to ever enter her life again, no matter how it was brought about. I lumbered to my feet, arms thrown out to counteract the slipperiness of my feet. I faced Ariel, drinking in the sight of her. She was pink now and had more flesh on her small frame. The baby hair, still fine and floating in the liquid of the tank, was a dark gold, while the tiny lashes that had begun to grow along her eyelids were already thick and black. Mary had been right about one more thing besides her assertion that I would help her. Ariel was perfect. I placed my hand on the tank once more and whispered a promise to Ariel. "I'm coming back, little one. I'm coming back, and I'm going to get us both out of here. I swear I'm not letting either one of us spend another day here. I'm coming back, Ariel. I'm coming back, Ariel." Leaving a bloody handprint on the glass, like a physical manifestation of my vow, I went again to the workbenches and looked at the wicked implements on them. Knives, both large and small, for stabbing, flensing, slicing, were lovingly laid out next to more hooks, spikes, augers, hammers, and other items I couldn't begin to explain. I stared for a minute before making my choices. A long, thin knife with a keen edge, and a handle that I could grip with my whole hand, and an item like a small crowbar, its teeth sharp and clearly not meant for opening doors. I took one last look at Ariel and left the circular room. In the corridor, I paused, listening for Mary. I could hear nothing in either direction and tried to decide which direction to take. I remembered an old Stephen King novel which said that most people, when faced with this kind of decision, would follow their dominant hand. The heroine of that book had known this and deliberately turned in the opposite direction. I did too, moving away from the doorframe and to the left. I walked for maybe 5 minutes before the adrenaline flooded out of me like water bursting from a dam. Trembling, I leaned against the clammy wall and tried to calm my breathing. The cowardice I had momentarily conquered was back with a vengeance. When Mary made her way to the circular room in search of the Tweedles, she would see what I had done, and she would come for me. I was why she resembled a walking fucking corpse. I made my feet move, trying to put some distance between myself and that room, and trying to will myself into bravery. I had taken down both twins, I told myself. Mary would be no harder. Then I remembered that she was pregnant, and like a lioness, she was going to fight to kill in order to protect both the baby she currently carried and the one she had installed in the tank. Terror had all but paralyzed me, and yet I still managed to put one foot in front of the other. If she was going to come for me, I wanted as much time as possible. A minute or so later, I came to another door. I pressed an ear against it, but only for a split second. The smell seeping through the door frame was abhorrent, sickly sweet but bitter, putrid and rank. It nearly brought me to my knees again. I backed against the wall opposite and tried to breathe through my mouth in an attempt to avoid the smell. It made no difference. My mouth filled with a greasy bouquet that made me gag. Ooh. Hearing nothing, I knew Mary wasn't behind the door. If she had been sick enough to vomit in the corridor, she was probably still hugging porcelain somewhere else. No, something else was behind this door. Hating myself, wanting to run away, but determined regardless, I steeled myself and pushed the door open slowly. Nothing I can write will describe the abominable horror of the room I found myself in. No nightmarish feat of cinema or fiction could put it into words. A rotting, rancid, fetal, and infant charnel house met my eyes, and I emptied the bile from my stomach onto the viscid floor. Piles of what had once been living tissue rose towards the ceiling in foul pyramids, while discernible features melted into waxy horrors that even the worst sadist would hide from. A twisted rainbow of colors was in force, strewn throughout the tiny corpses in carrion, and the miasma of filth was choking. Here, Mary and the twins had stored their failed attempts at creating life, the barely begun, and those whose fight for life had ended outside the womb. As I looked through the thick wash of tears that I wished would blind me, I could see how wasted and withered these poor creatures had been. My being here made more sense than ever. Mary and the Tweedles were, for whatever reason, determined to bring a child into the world, but their ill-made offspring were more twisted than they and had never survived. Ariel must have been the first to show signs of hope, and so I had been fooled, tricked into coming here and sustaining her fragile grip on life. It had worked, and she was thriving, and so my captors had decided to bring forth another life in the hopes that their success could be repeated. In my anguish, I sank once again to the floor, dropping my weapons so that I could brace myself with my hands. When they met something soft and pliable, I recoiled, terrified that I had laid my hands on a festering pile of flesh. I hadn't. Unnoticed in the midst of the gore was a mattress, and it was this I had gripped. Stained and abused, the threadbare thing had been indistinguishable until it was right in front of me. For a moment, my mind froze, trying to reject the conclusion it was rapidly reaching, but it was too late. Repugnance turned to blistering loathing as I finally knew where it was that Mary and the twins had been coming while I had been strapped to my chair, feeding their child. Here, in this unholy pit, they had made their new baby. Here they had rutted and fucked, surrounded by the carnage of their previous conceptions. Perhaps they had made Ariel here too. Naked rage propelled me to my feet. My tools were once again in my hands as I turned my back on the room and strode out to find a suitable waiting place. I left the door open. I want Mary to know that I know. I want her to be scared of me for a change. She should be. She should be. Because I'm going to fucking end her.